Maya Ortiz had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous person in any room is rarely the loudest one in it. At 34, she looked like exactly what she appeared to be. A tired mother in a faded Houston Astros t-shirt, hair scraped back in a stub of a ponytail, mascara she hadn't and oppos. T bothered to reapply since 6 that morning. She drove a 10-year-old Honda CR-V with a cracked visor and a booster seat in the back. She worked as a project coordinator for a commercial plumbing supplier, the kind of job that came with a lanyard and a parking spot nobody fought over. If you stood behind her in line at H-E-B, you would have pegged her, accurately as far as it went, as a woman running on 4 hours of sleep and coffee, doing the invisible math that mothers do. Pick-up time, dinner, the permission slip due tomorrow, the load of laundry that had been sitting damp in the washer since yesterday. What you would not have guessed, could not have guessed, was that 6 years earlier Maya Ortiz had been Staff Sergeant Ortiz, one of 9 women selected for a cultural support team attached to a Ranger battalion, embedded on night raids in Kandahar province where the men she worked beside would later tell people, in the careful, respectful way operators talk about people who earned it, that she was the steadiest hand in the stack. She had gone through 2 combat deployments. She had carried a man named Ruiz 400 meters on a dislocated ankle because the ground was too hot for the bird to land. She had watched a friend die in a doorway in Zabul district and had not cried until she was on the plane home, alone, 3 seats from anyone else, silent behind sunglasses she didn't and oppos. Need indoors. She had gotten out when Ellie was born. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to be a person her daughter could reach for in the night, not a photograph on a shelf that might someday come home in a box. Her husband David had understood that trait in his bones. He and oppos, D been Army too before they met, a supply sergeant who and oppos, D done his time and gotten out clean. He was the one who suggested Houston, who found the little house with the pecan tree in the backyard, who used to say that the 2 of them had earned boring, and boring was underrated. He died 18 months ago on the Gulf Freeway, T-boned by a driver who ran a red light doing 60, and boring stopped being a thing they were building together and became instead a thing Maya built alone brick by brick for Ellie and Oppo's sake. She boxed up the medals. She folded the uniform she was technically still allowed to keep and put it at the bottom of a container in the attic, under Christmas ornaments, where she wooed and oppos. T have to look at it by accident. She told almost no one. Not because she was ashamed of it, she wasn't an oppos. T not for a second, but because she had learned watching other veterans try to explain themselves to civilians who wanted either a hero story or a trauma story and nothing in between, that the truth just didn't and oppos. T fit in casual conversation. It was easier to be the quiet mom with the tired eyes. It required no explanation. It asked nothing of anyone. Her only real habit, the one thing she kept for herself, was Faro Fitness, a converted warehouse gym on the east side with rubber floors that smelled permanently of chalk and old sweat. She went at 6:30 in the evening after picking Ellie up from the after-school program at her school, and Danny Reyes, the gym and oppos' owner, a barrel-built ex-firefighter with forearms like ham hocks and a soft spot for kids, let Ellie sit in the little glass-walled office behind the front desk with her homework and a stack of gym-branded scratch paper to draw on. Maya and oppos' workouts were unglamorous. Deadlifts, pull-ups, 20 minutes on the heavy bag in the back corner where the ceiling fan didn't and oppos' quite reach. She wore an oversized zip-up even in August, not because she was cold but because it hid the 2 things she didn't and oppos' want strangers cataloging, the ropey, functional muscle across her shoulders, built by years of a 65-pound ruck, and the thin white scar that ran from her collarbone toward her sternum, a souvenir from a doorway in Zabul she didn't and oppos' talk about. To the people who noticed her at all, she was just a stocky, unremarkable mom sweating out a bad day. Which was more or less exactly how she wanted it. Brooke and Paisley Calloway wanted to be noticed by everyone all the time, and had built a small fortune out of making sure they were. They were sisters 26 and 24, daughters of a Houston real estate developer, who had funded their first ring light before either of them had held a job. Both were competitive Muay Thai fighters, genuinely skilled, which was part of the problem because talent without humility just means the damage takes longer to teach its lesson. Between them they had built Callaway Combat, a fitness and lifestyle channel with just under 400,000 followers, built on a formula that was cheap to produce and expensive to everyone around them. Film confrontations with average gym-goers and edit them to make the sisters look untouchable, caption them with something like POV. You talk trash to a real fighter, and watch the engagement roll in. They had joined Pharaoh 3 months earlier after their old gym banned them for exactly this behavior, and Danny, who needed the membership revenue more than he needed the peace, and who hadn't oppose yet seen them at their worst, had let them in. Maya avoided them on instinct, the same instinct that used to tell her which doorway in a compound was wired and which wasn't oppose. It wasn't oppose fear. It was pattern recognition. The sisters filled space the way certain animals do, loud, showy, constantly testing the perimeter to see what they could claim. They dropped weights for the sound of it. They critiqued strangers and oppose, form loud enough to be overheard, then panned the camera to catch the reaction. Danny hated them and kept them anyway, the way small business owners keep a lot of things they hate, because the math worked out in the moment and the cost showed up later when it was harder to walk back. The first real friction came on a Tuesday in March. Maya was running behind. Ellie had a book report due and had negotiated, with the shameless confidence of a 6-year-old, a trip for frozen yogurt if she finished it before Maya and Appo's workout was over. Maya walked up to the only open squat rack to knock out her last set. Paisley had claimed it, not to use, but to rest a gym bag and a ring light on the empty barbell while she and Brooke filmed a segment 2 racks down. And quote, "Hey, you guys using this rack?" And quote, Maya asked. Even and pleasant. Hands loose at her sides. Paisley turned, gave her the 2-second scan people do when they and oppose, redeciding how much a stranger is worth. The scan Maya had learned to read a decade ago, in rooms far more dangerous than this one, and clocked the baggy zip up, the ponytail, the tired eyes, and decided the answer was, not much. And quote, "We need it for the shot, hon," and quote, Paisley said. And quote, "Lighting and oppose, better here." And quote, "I just need 2 minutes." And quote, Brooke, adjusting the tripod, didn't and oppose to even look over. And quote, "Try the Smith machine. It and oppose basically the same thing for people who aren't and oppose really lifting anyway." And quote, there was a flicker, brief, cold, gone almost before it registered, that crossed Maya and Appo's face. It was the same flatness she used to wear crossing a compound courtyard at 0300, the look of someone doing math the other person couldn't and oppose see. Then she glanced toward the glass office, where Ellie had her face nearly pressed to the window, holding up a finished worksheet with the kind of grin that only 6-year-olds can produce on command. The math resolved itself instantly. Not worth it. Nothing here was worth it. And quote, "No problem," and quote, Maya said and meant it mostly. She packed her bag, collected her daughter, and got the frozen yogurt. Behind her, she heard Paisley mutter something to Brooke, and Brooke laugh. She didn't and oppose need to hear the words to know the shape of them. She and oppose heard that shape her whole life in different rooms, from different people who mistook her quiet for an absence rather than a decision. She let it go. That was the job now. Letting things go was the job. The problem, as the Calloway sisters saw it 3 weeks later, was numbers. Their engagement had been sliding, a soft, unglamorous slide that no amount of ring light could fix, the kind that made sponsors start asking pointed questions in emails with subject lines like checking in on Q2 deliverables. Their manager, a sharp-elbowed 28-year-old named Colt who and oppose built his own small career booking talent for exactly this kind of content, had told them flatly, "You need a new arc. Give me a villain the algorithm hasn't and oppose seen yet." They needed a foil. Someone who read at a glance as harmless, soft, tired, beneath notice, so the reversal would land. They scrolled back through months of gym footage looking for a face, and they found her almost by accident. The quiet woman in the oversized zip-up who worked the heavy bag alone every evening while her kid did homework in the office. Her Brooke had said, tapping the screen. "Soccer mom energy. Perfect." It happened on a Friday, the gym at its loudest, a bass line thudding through the floor. Ellie was on the bench near the heavy bags, safely clear of the weights per Maya and Appo's rule, drawing a horse with a broken open box of crayons balanced on her knee. Maya had her hands wrapped, working the bag in slow, controlled combinations, not for show, just for the rhythm of it, the way some people run and some people garden, and Maya hit things methodically until the noise in her head went quiet. She didn't and oppose noticed the tripod going up 10 feet away until Paisley and Appo's voice cut through the music. And quote, "Everybody look at this," and quote, Paisley said, loud, performative, pitched for the camera and not for Maya at all. And quote, "This is what we mean when we talk about delusion. Lady thinks she and Appo's Rocky because she can slap a bag." End quote. Maya lowered her hands. Turned. Brooke was already circling for a better angle, phone up, red light blinking. End quote. "Turn it off," end quote, Maya said. "Quiet. Level." End quote. "Oh, did that hurt your feelings?" End quote. Paisley stepped closer, well inside the distance most people instinctively respect. End quote. "I and Appo's am educating my audience. Showing them the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cardio cosplays." End quote. End quote. "I and Appo's am not bothering anyone. Leave it alone." End quote. Brooke laughed. End quote. "Prove it then. 15 seconds on the mats. Light work. Let and Appo's see what the bag slapping actually translates to." End quote. Maya and Appo's eyes moved past Paisley and Appo's shoulder, found Ellie. Her daughter had looked up from the horse, crayon still in her fist, confusion tightening her small face into something that made Maya and Appo's chest go cold in a way no firefight ever had. The calculation ran through her the way it always had, fast and involuntary, the training that never fully turns off. Paisley and Appo's weight is on her lead foot, unbalanced. A low kick takes the leg out clean. Brooke and Appo's holding the phone in her strong hand, jaw exposed, distracted. 3 seconds, maybe less, to put her on the ground and keep her there. It wasn't an Appo's Tia thought so much as a readout, the way some people in Appo's minds automatically convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. She had spent a decade being paid, in part, to have that readout available on demand. She also knew with the same certainty what it would cost. Ellie watching her mother put 2 women on the floor. Police. Video. The quiet, boring life she had built plank by plank since David died. Burned down for the satisfaction of 30 seconds she and Appo's regret by morning. End quote. "I Don and Appo's fight," end quote, Maya said and picked up her gym bag. She was 3 steps past them when Paisley, annoyed that the footage wasn't and Appo's landing that the end quote, villain end quote, wasn't and Appo's performing, reached out and shoved her shoulder hard, more for the camera than out of any real anger. Maya caught herself before she fell, but the gym bag swung wide on its strap and clipped the edge of Ellie and Appo's bench. The crayon box hit the floor and burst, 30 crayons skittering and snapping across the rubber mats in 100 small, broken pieces of color. Ellie made a small, startled sound and pulled her knees up to her chest, eyes wide, bottom lip already trembling. For 1 full second, the whole gym went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something real has just happened inside something that was supposed to be a performance. Even the regulars who usually ignored the sisters and Appo's antics looked away, uncomfortable, the specific discomfort of watching an adult get bullied in front of her kid. Something in Maya and Appo's posture changed. The slouch dropped away. Her shoulders squared, chest lifted, and for a half second the softness that usually rounded her expression vanished completely, replaced by something flat and ancient and entirely without mercy. The same look she and Appo's worn clearing rooms in Kandahar, the look that had once made a translator, watching her work, quietly tell someone else that the American woman scared him more than any of the men did. Paisley actually took a step back. Some old, unschooled animal part of her recognized the danger a half second before her brain caught up, and told her it was ridiculous. Then Maya exhaled, long and slow, and knelt down on the mat. She gathered the broken crayons one by one, methodically, and set them back in the box. Brooke, recovering her nerve, zoomed in on Maya and Appo's hands. End quote. "That and Appo's it. Pick up your little toys and get out of grown folks and Appo's way." End quote. Maya didn't and Appo's answer. She placed the box in Ellie and Appo's lap, lifted her daughter onto her hip, 6 years old and getting heavy for this, but Maya carried her anyway, all the way to the car, while behind them the sisters high-fived over what they were already calling out loud end quote, insane content end quote. In the car, Ellie was quiet for 3 full minutes, staring out the window at the strip malls sliding past, still clutching the crayon box in both hands like something precious that had been proven fragile. End quote, "Mama," end quote, she finally said. End quote. "Why were those ladies mean to you?" End quote. Maya kept her eyes on the road and her voice even, the way she and Appo's Dee learned to keep her voice even for things far worse than this. End quote. They weren't and oppose. T really mean at me, baby. They were performing. For their phone. End quote. End quote. But you didn't and oppose. T do anything back. End quote. End quote. No end quote. End quote. Why not? End quote. Maya was quiet for a second too long before she answered, and Ellie, sharp the way only children of quiet parents learn to be, noticed the pause. End quote. Because sometimes, end quote. Maya said finally, end quote. Being strong means knowing exactly what you could do and choosing not to. That and oppose. S harder than fighting. It and oppose. S not as easy to see, but it and oppose. S harder. End quote. Ellie considered this with the total seriousness of a first grader turning over a piece of grown-up logic that doesn't and oppose. T quite sit right yet. End quote. Daddy said you were the toughest person he ever met, end quote, she said. End quote. Was that true? End quote. The question landed somewhere under Maya and oppose. S ribs and stayed there. David used to say it as a joke half the time, and dead serious the other half, and Maya had never quite figured out which version was truer. She thought of him now, not the accident she and oppose. Dee trained her mind away from replaying that, but the sound of his laugh in the kitchen, the way he used to say boring is underrated like it was a secret only the two of them knew, like the life they and oppose. Dee built together was itself a kind of victory nobody else could see. End quote. It was true, end quote. Maya said quietly. End quote. Your daddy didn't and oppose. T say things he didn't and oppose. T mean. End quote. Ellie went back to looking out the window apparently satisfied, and Maya drove the rest of the way home with her jaw tight and her hands steady on the wheel, thinking about the specific quiet violence of watching your child learn. From your own restraint what it looks like when a bully wins. The video went up that night, cut down to 90 seconds, caption she thought she could hang with a laughing emoji, and by Sunday it had cleared 400,000 views. The editing was surgical. It started with Maya on the heavy bag, cut straight to Brooke and Oppo's challenge and ended on Maya kneeling to pick up the crayons, the sound of Brooke and Oppo's pick up your little toys laid over a freeze frame of Maya and Oppo's face. The part where Paisley shoved her, the part where Ellie flinched gone. Just a story about a soft woman who folded. Maya didn't and Oppo's. T have social media hadn't and Oppo's. T in years but she didn't and Oppo's. T needed to feel the shape of what had happened. At school drop-off Monday, a mother she and Oppo's D been cordially friendly with for 2 years suddenly found something urgent to do with her phone rather than make eye contact. Danny called her Tuesday morning, apologetic and furious in equal measure, offering to pull the sisters and Oppo's memberships on the spot. Maya told him not to. She wasn't and Oppo's. T sure yet why, only that some old, patient part of her recognized that pulling a membership wasn't and Oppo's. T going to fix the thing that actually needed fixing. The moment that cracked something open in her came on Wednesday night, in the middle of paying bills at the kitchen table, when her phone buzzed with a name she hadn't and Oppo's. T seen in over a year, Ruiz. Marcus Ruiz, the ankle, the 400 meters, the man who owed her a debt he and Oppo's D tried to repay a dozen different ways over a decade and never felt was settled, was running a training facility out near San Antonio now, and half his staff had apparently sent him the video within an hour of it going up. End quote. Tell me that wasn't an Oppo's. Tu end quote. He said no hello the second she picked up. Maya closed her laptop. End quote. It was me. End quote. End quote. Ortiz. End quote. He said her old rank name like it still meant something because to him it always would. End quote. I watched 2 influencers push you around in front of your kid and you just took it? End quote. So let me ask you something and I want you to actually think about it before you get defensive. What did Ellie learn Friday? Not what you meant to teach her. What did she actually watch happen? End quote. Maya didn't and Oppo's T answer right away. She was thinking about the car ride home, about why didn't and Oppo's T you do anything back, about the particular careful way her daughter had looked at her since like she was reassessing something. End quote. She learned that people can do whatever they want to you. End quote. Ruiz said quietly when Maya didn't and Oppo's T fill the silence. End quote. As long as you love someone enough to stay soft for them. That and Oppo's not nothing or tease. That and Oppo's a lesson that sticks. You planning to let it be the one she keeps? End quote. End quote. I and Oppo's am not going to fight two 20-something influencers in a gym parking lot, Marcus. That and Oppos. S not who I am anymore. End quote. End quote. I and Oppos am not telling you to fight them in a parking lot. End quote. A pause, and she could hear the old grin come into his voice, the one she remembered from 100 briefings where the plan was about to get interesting. End quote. I and Oppos am telling you to fight them somewhere they can, and Oppos. T edit the footage. Somewhere they picked the rules. You Don and Oppos. T chase them into the dark or tease. You wait for them to drag you into the light, and then you make sure everyone and Oppos S watching when they lose. End quote. The following afternoon, Maya walked into Danny and Oppos S office during her lunch break alone without Ellie. End quote. There and Oppos S a flyer in the lobby, end quote, she said. End quote. Charity fight card next month. Kickboxing and grappling amateur bracket proceeds to the children and Oppos S hospital burn unit, end quote. Danny looked up from his ledger, wary. End quote. Yeah. The Callaways basically strong-armed me into hosting it. Good publicity for them, they said. I figured it, and Oppos D bring in donations, so I let it go. End quote. He studied her face. End quote. Why? End quote. End quote. Put my name on the bracket. End quote. End quote. Maya. End quote. Danny set down his pen. End quote. I like you. I and Oppos am not going to pretend I Don and Oppos. T know you and Oppos. Re stronger than you let on, I and Oppos. V watched you deadlift more than half the guys in here without breaking a sweat. But those two have been training since they were kids. Competition rules. This ISN and Oppos. T a fair fight just because you and Oppos. V got a mean look in your eye. End quote. Maya held his gaze, and something in her expression, flat, certain, entirely without the softness he was used to, made him stop talking. End quote. Put my name on the bracket, Danny. End quote. He did. When the finalized card went up on the gym and Oppos S bulletin board 3 days later, it took less than an hour for the whispering to reach the Callaway sisters. Paisley found it first, scrolling the digital board on her phone between sets, and called Brooke over with a bark of disbelieving laughter. End quote. No way. No way. End quote. She turned the phone so Brooke could see. Featherweight open grappling bracket, first round. Paisley Callaway versus Maya Ortiz. End quote. She signed up, end quote. Brooke said, incredulous. End quote. The crayon lady signed up. End quote. End quote. This is a gift, end quote. Paisley said, already composing the caption in her head. End quote. This is literally a gift. Round 2 of the exact same storyline, except this time it and Oppos S sanctioned, it and Oppos S filmed properly, and I get to actually finish it. End quote. End quote. Don and Oppos T hurt her too bad, end quote. Brooke said, grinning. End quote. We still need her walking for the follow-up content. End quote. They had no idea that 6 miles away, in a stripped-down strength and conditioning gym owned by a retired Golden Gloves boxer who didn't and Oppos T ask questions and didn't and Oppos T care about anyone and Oppos S followers, Maya Ortiz had already peeled the soft mom persona off like a coat she and Oppos D been wearing too long in a warm room. For 4 weeks, Maya trained the way she used to train before deployments. Not for aesthetics, not for a number on a scale, but with the flat, purposeful violence of someone resharpening a tool that had been sitting unused in a drawer. She was up at 4:45, running with a weighted vest before Ellie and Oppos S alarm went off. She hired a jiu-jitsu black belt 2 evenings a week, a quiet, serious woman named Priya who had competed at a national level before blowing out a knee, and asked her flatly to teach her how to convert military close quarters technique into something that could survive inside a rulebook without losing its teeth. Priya watched her drill limb control for the first time, the same mechanical precision Maya had once used to secure a detainee and Oppos S wrists in under 2 seconds, and said quietly, end quote, you and Oppos V done this before. Not the sport version. The real version. End quote. End quote. A long time ago, end quote. Maya said, and didn't and Oppos T elaborate, and Priya to her credit didn't and Oppos T push. There was one morning 3 weeks in that stayed with Maya afterward more than any of the others. It was still dark, the kind of pre-dawn Houston humidity that sits on your skin like a second layer, and she was running her 4th mile with the vest digging into her shoulders, breath ragged, legs burning, and for one disorienting half-mile she wasn't oppos, T in Houston at all. She was back on a dirt track outside a forward operating base, 26 years old, running because if she stopped running she and oppos, D have to think about the doorway in Zabul. And the running had always been the thing. That kept the thinking at bay. She let herself stay there for a while in that overlapping place between two versions of her life, and when she came back to herself, sweat-soaked in the Texas dark 6 miles from her sleeping daughter, she understood, clearly for the first time since David died, that the woman training in secret before dawn wasn't oppos, T a costume she was putting back on. She was still in there. She had never actually left. She thought about Ellie and Oppo's question in the car. Was that true? It was true. It had always been true. She had just spent 18 months convincing herself that keeping it hidden was the same thing as keeping it safe. By the 4th week she wasn't Oppo's training to survive a gym card fight against 2 influencers. She was training to make sure her daughter never again had a reason to ask why her mother let someone push her around. The morning of the charity card, Faro Fitness had been transformed, bleachers borrowed from a nearby high school, a food truck idling in the parking lot, a real cage-style mat set up under temporary lighting rigs the sisters had rented themselves, because of course they had, because production value mattered more to them than the charity the whole event was ostensibly for. The Calloway sisters arrived like they were headlining. Matching branded rash guards, an entourage of 3 assistants, a photographer circling for content before the first bell had even rung. Paisley predicted a first-round finish to anyone who and oppos, D hold a microphone still long enough to hear it. Maya came in through the side entrance alone, in a plain black rash guard with no logo on it. She carried a small duffel and nothing else. Her resting heart rate, if anyone had bothered to check, sat at a cool 52 beats a minute. In the corner of the locker room she looked at her phone one last time. The lock screen was a photo of Elliot 4 years old, laughing at something just off camera, David and Oppo's hand visible at the edge of the frame, resting on her small shoulder, and then she put the phone away and didn't and Oppo's look at it again. She was done waiting. The referee, a serious, no-nonsense woman named Denise who and Oppo's been running amateur cards in Texas for 15 years and had absolutely no patience for showmanship, called both fighters to the center of the mat. Paisley jogged out with her chin high, playing to the 3 cameras her team had positioned around the cage. She didn't and Oppo's look at Maya and Oppo's face at all. Her eyes went straight to the middle of her chest, dismissing her before the bell even rang. End quote. Standard grappling rules, end quote, Denise said. End quote. No strikes, no small joint manipulation, protect yourself at all times. Touch gloves if you want. End quote. Paisley didn't and Oppo's offer her hand. End quote. Let and Oppo's just get this over with. End quote. Maya said nothing. She nodded once to Denise and settled into a stance that made 2 people in the front row, old grapplers themselves, there for the charity not the content, sit up a little straighter because something about the way she held her weight didn't and Oppo's look like a soccer mom at all. End quote. Fight, end quote, Denise called. Paisley came in hot, the way she always did on camera, launching into a flashy flying attack meant to look spectacular from 3 angles at once. It was the kind of move that worked beautifully against someone who and Oppo's never actually been grabbed by a person who meant it. Maya didn't and Oppo's stepped back. She stepped in, absorbing Paisley and Oppo's momentum against a base that didn't and Oppo's move and caught her midair the way you catch a duffel bag being thrown at you, matter of fact, absorbed rather than dramatic. For one suspended half-second Paisley hung there, and something in her face changed, the first flicker of a realization that this was. Maya put her down hard, controlled the landing so nothing snapped that wasn't an Oppo's supposed to, and moved through her guard with a flat economical brutality that had nothing to do with sport jiu-jitsu and everything to do with a decade of putting bodies exactly where she needed them to be. She dropped a knee into Paisley and Oppo's diaphragm, wrapped an arm around her head, and settled her full weight down like something with no interest in negotiating. Paisley and Oppo's chest locked. She thrashed, found nothing to move against. Maya and Oppo's weight might as well have been poured concrete, and the panic that flooded her face was real in a way none of her content ever was. End quote. You wanted an audience, end quote, Maya said low, just for her. End quote. Now you have one. End quote. She isolated the arm with the same unhurried precision she and Appos D once used clearing a room, extended it to the exact edge of what the joint could take and held it there. Not to break it. To make the choice unmistakably, completely Paisley and Appos S. Paisley tapped the mat 3 times fast, all the performance gone out of her voice. End quote. Tap tap I tap, end quote. Denise moved in immediately. End quote. Stop. Tap out. Winner Ortiz. End quote. The fight had lasted 31 seconds. Maya rose, breathing exactly as evenly as when she and Appos D walked in and returned to her corner without looking at the cameras. Behind her, Paisley curled onto her side on the mat, coughing, humiliation written across her face far more visibly than any pain, while 3 separate phones caught every second of it live. The gym had gone dead quiet, the particular silence that follows something everyone thought they understood being proven wrong in real time. When Brooke, watching from the edge of the mat, felt something ugly and irrational ignite behind her ribs. Their whole brand ran on invincibility. If the internet saw Paisley tapped out in 31 seconds by the woman they and Appos D mocked for months, there would be no recovering it by nightfall. She didn't and Appos T wait for the bracket. She vaulted the low fence and stormed onto the mat, pointing a shaking finger at Maya. End quote. You. Me. Right now. End quote. Denise stepped between them, hand up. End quote. That and Appos S. Not how this works. You and Appos V got your own matches later in the card. End quote. End quote. I don't and Appos T care about the card. End quote. Brooke shoved past her, glaring at Danny, who was standing ringside looking like a man watching his charity event turn into something he hadn't and Appos T budgeted for. End quote. Make it happen, Danny, or we pull our memberships and half our followers with them. End quote. Danny hesitated, torn, and it was Maya and Appos S. voice, quiet, even carrying anyway, that answered before he could. End quote. Let her fight. End quote. Everyone turned. Maya had already risen and was walking back toward the center of the mat, unhurried, her eyes on Brooke with an absolute, hollowed-out calm that had nothing left in it to prove. End quote. If she wants the lesson early, end quote, Maya said, end quote, I and Appos I'll give it to her. End quote. Denise sighed, clearly unhappy about it, but waved them both to the center. The crowd, sensing something raw and unscripted about to happen, surged closer, phones already lifting. End quote. You and Appos refinished, end quote. Brooke hissed, dropping into an aggressive stance. End quote. I and Appos am going to put you to sleep in front of everyone who and Appos S ever doubted us. End quote. End quote. Breathe, Brooke, end quote, Maya said almost gently. End quote. You and Appos going to need it. End quote. End quote. Fight, end quote, Denise called. Brooke came forward fast and threw a wild looping strike that had no business in a grappling match at all. Pure ego, pure desperation. The kind of foul only someone who and Appos D stopped thinking clearly would risk in front of a licensed referee. Maya had seen slower things move in dust storms. She slipped inside the arc without hurry, caught the back of Brooke and Appos S neck in a controlled clinch and used her own forward momentum to put her on the mat with a sharp, efficient hip throw that emptied the air from Brooke and Appos S lungs in one violent exhale. Before Brooke could scramble, Maya had the arm locked, pinned flush, the position total and unarguable. End quote. This is what it actually is, end quote, Maya said, quiet enough that only Brooke in the nearest microphone caught it. End quote. Not a ring light. Not a caption. This is what it feels like to be completely at someone in Appos S mercy with nothing you can do about it. You built a whole channel out of making other people feel this. You should know what it costs. End quote. She let the pressure build by fractions, not to injure, but to make the point undeniable. A slow, deliberate escalation that left absolutely no question, to Brooke or to the 300 people watching, about who controlled the outcome. End quote. Tap, I tap, please, end quote. Maya released instantly, rose, adjusted her rash guard, and walked back to her corner without a glance at the cameras or the crowd. She picked up her duffel, slung it over her shoulder, and headed for the exit, the crowd parting around her without a word. Near the back door, leaning against a stack of crash pads with the quiet, satisfied stillness of a man who and Appos D known exactly how this would go, Marcus Ruiz gave her a single sharp nod. Maya returned it and kept walking. By Sunday, the internet had done what the internet does, turned fast and total, the way it always eventually turns on people who mistake an audience for an army. The unedited livestream footage, 31 seconds and then a second longer humiliation, had been clipped and reshared with captions that had nothing to do with the story the sisters had spent months building. Two of Callaway Combat and Oppo's smaller sponsors quietly pulled their names from upcoming posts within 48 hours. Colt, their manager, stopped returning calls by Tuesday. At Pharaoh Fitness, the sisters never came back at all, not even to collect the gear they and Oppo's left in their lockers. Danny eventually donated it to a youth boxing program on the north side, which felt to more than one regular at the gym like exactly the right ending. The mother from school drop-off who and Oppo's avoided Maya and Oppo's eyes that Monday found her unprompted at pickup 2 weeks later. End quote. I saw the footage and quote, she said a little sheepish. End quote. The real footage, not the edited one. I and Oppo's. I'm sorry I didn't and Oppo's say anything before. That wasn't and Oppo's fair to you. End quote. End quote. You didn't and Oppo's no end quote, Maya said and meant it. She had spent a long time being someone people didn't and Oppo's know anything about. That wasn't and Oppo's going to change overnight and she wasn't and Oppo's sure it needed to. On a Monday evening 3 weeks later, the Houston sky doing its slow gold to purple fade, Maya pushed open the glass doors of Pharaoh Fitness in her old, faded zip-up, a pink dinosaur backpack slung over one shoulder instead of her own gym bag. Danny looked up from the front desk and grinned, wide and easy, some of the tension that had lived in his face for weeks finally gone. End quote. Hey Nate Maya. Good to see you back to normal. End quote. End quote. Just here for the bag Danny end quote. She said smiling, her voice back to its familiar quiet warmth. End quote. Standard routine. End quote. Through the glass wall of the office, Ellie sat at the little desk, tongue between her teeth in concentration, coloring a dragon in careful deliberate strokes, new crayons unbroken, a full 64-count box Maya had bought without saying anything about why. Maya wrapped her hands at the bag in the back corner, the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead, and worked through slow, controlled combinations exactly as she had 100 evenings before the sisters ever noticed her. Nothing about the scene looked different from any other night at Pharaoh Fitness. A tired mom, a kid doing homework behind glass, a gym humming along toward closing time. But when Ellie glanced up between crayon strokes and caught her mother and Oppo's eye through the glass, there was something new in the look that passed between them. Not fear, not confusion, but a kind of settled certainty that hadn't and Oppo's been there before. Her mother was not someone who needed protecting. Her mother was the protection. Maya didn't and Oppo's need anyone to know what she used to be. She wasn't and Oppo's interested in being anyone and Oppo's hero, and she certainly wasn't and Oppo's interested in being anyone and Oppo's cautionary tale. She was just a mother keeping her peace who understood, better than almost anyone in that building, that the strongest people are usually the ones you and Oppo's never think to be afraid of, right up until the moment they decide you should be. She threw her last combination, unwrapped her hands and went to get her daughter, so they could go home and eat dinner and be, for one more quiet evening, exactly as boring and exactly as safe as David had always promised they and Oppo's earned.